Record to the cloud. Got it. Hi, welcome to our January edition of our Chattanooga Black Jewish Dialogue. This has been a wonderful series of conversations and meetings, and really we've had such great speakers, and this will continue this month, and then good follow-up discussions as well. They're always enlightening and engaging, and we just couldn't feel more fortunate to have the leadership that we have, that with Deborah Levine helping us to do the coordination and helping us to bring in guests like we have today. And our topic this week is about media and community. And so we have local celebrity here, LaTrice Currie, who is a native Tennessean, graduated from Hampton University, and joined Chattanooga's Channel 3 back in 1995 and co-anchors at noon and 5:30, and also serves as ION Health reporter, which has kept her busy the last couple of years, I am sure, and host of Trends on 3. She's won many awards, including the Chattanooga Woman of Distinction, Hamilton County Outstanding Citizen, Black Excellence Chattanooga Best Media Personality, the Times Free Press Best Chattanoogan, and the NAACP Image Awards. She serves as an ambassador for Go Red for Women and on various boards. The Moccasin Bend Girl Scout Council, Big Brothers Big Sisters of Chattanooga, Advisory Board for Volunteers in Medicine, and the Partnership for Families, Children, and Adults, and has found a way to make time to be with us today. So LaTrice, welcome. And then also we have today a friend of mine, relatively new to Chattanooga, especially by comparison to LaTrice, but someone who's really made her mark in this community in just a couple of years that she's been here. Ilene is a photographer. Ilene Gould is a photographer, writer, illustrator, and a full-time news producer for Channel 9 in Chattanooga, where she's produced every show from mornings to dayside evening shows to nightside, and occasionally sleeps. She also co-produced an hour-long town hall called Changing Chattanooga. She's a graduate of Michigan State University, with a degree in media and information, a concentration in film and video production, and has minors in fiction filmmaking and music. Ilene also works part-time as community manager at Better Sax, where saxophonist Jay Metcalf teaches and creates online lessons to learn to play the saxophone by ear. That sounds really interesting. Maybe you'll have a chance to talk about that a little bit too. And you're also, you were in the marching band at Michigan State as well, is that correct?
Yes, I spent 4 years as a mellophone player and a squad leader, and was also serving as the vice president of the ensemble my senior year.
Awesome. So after graduation, you've had a bit of more time to relax, it sounds like.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Okay, so I'm really going to turn this over to our speakers and let you just kind of talk about how you got to what you're doing today. Also, then why you feel particularly that this topic of media and community is an important one for a forum such as ours to discuss. And in no real particular order, just she was first on my introduction list. We'll start with LaTrice, and then Ilene, and then we'll have a chance for some Q&A. So hang on, LaTrice, I'm going to spotlight you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
And of course, with perfect timing, my iPad was about to go dead. And so I ran and got the charger and put it on. I was like, oh, I forgot to charge that. So, but anyway, I just want to say I am just so grateful and glad to be here and to join in this discussion today when it comes to media and the community and just what it is and what is my role. And I think that one of the things that especially over the years, I think, first of all, it's important to say that while, and we can get into this, about it is so important, I think, diversity on every level. When we start talking about in the media and companies, it is so important because you have to have that different level and those different thoughts and ideas and those different perspectives to really understand, I think, and to really make things work and to really, really bring about a representation of the community. So I think that that's so important. But then also in being diverse, I think it is important that what I have tried to do over the years is to truly immerse myself in the community in various ways. And like some of those boards that you name were boards that I've served on in the past over the years, and different things and different things that I'm active with now today. But I think it is so important because to truly understand the community, you have to be a part of the community. And I think that again, it's not just, and I think this is important for people to remember. It's just like when I first came here, it's just because someone sees me and they're like, oh, you know, she is Black, she is a female. So we're going to automatically have this bond and this relationship with her. I think that while those things may initially capture attention and those things are initially important, it is so important for, again, I think that again, immerse yourself in the community and to truly become a part of the community. And then also, I think I always say, I have to let my work and my character speak for itself. And I think that that also really plays such a big role in what I do in this community. And as far as whether, you know, it's my job as an anchor, whether I'm out in the community doing something, participating in some of my civic organizations, doing community service work. So I think all of those things come into play, and all of those things play a role in, you know, who we are and as why it is important that we are there and we are doing what we are doing at our prospective companies, in the media, and when it comes to the community. And I know we're going to delve a lot deeper into different things throughout this that we are going to touch on, but that's just kind of my introduction.
Okay, thank you. Before I switch over to Ilene, I was just wondering if you could talk real quickly about your decision to come back to Chattanooga, to come home.
One of the things, it was after graduating from Hampton, and I didn't get my master's right away. I waited and wanted to work first before I did that. So you start looking at job opportunities, and I never shall forget where some of the job opportunities were. At the time, there was one like in Colorado somewhere. There was one at a town, a small town, town in Texas. And then I remember the opportunity here. And one of the things, I'm originally from, as you said, from Nashville. And family has always been very important to me. And also, I had heard some things about Chattanooga, and actually at one of my internships at Nashville and WSMV, one of the reporters anchors had worked here in Chattanooga before obviously I got here, and she was at Nashville then, but she told me, and I remember she said, hey, that's a great market. It's, you know, it's an up and coming city. And I remember when I got that call, I said, you know what? And I came to visit, and I just really ended up like, I like this place. And it's one of the things, I will tell you this, and Ilene can probably touch on this some too. Our business, a lot of people you see like in the last year here, you come and go and you move around, and sometimes people just get out of the business. There are quite a few people who've been at my station who are now here in the city, but they're in other positions and other jobs in the city. And so over the years, it used to be where you would get what you would call a lead from somewhere, and they would say, hey, are you interested in this job in such and such place? And it's like, hey, are you interested in this morning anchor job in, you know, it could be in Pittsburgh somewhere, or in Baltimore. And you really start to think, and at the time, we had just had my son, and well, he was starting to grow up and had his friends, and we were really getting involved in the community. So I decided, I think I made a conscious decision at that point that, you know, I want to stay here. And even if it's in my current role in the media, or some other role in a professional capacity here in Chattanooga. So that is kind of where I found myself. And I think you do. So when I tell people and I say, this is home for me now, it really is. It's home for me now. So, and when a place is home, you care about it as such, as home. It is special. What happens in your community, in your home matters. When there are good things, you're happy and you want to make sure that you let everyone know about that and that you promote that and that you celebrate that. And when there's something bad or something obviously not so good that happens, we should say, then obviously you want to make sure that you let people know about that, but you also want to bring out the strength and how you can make a difference and how you can help and how you can improve things and how you can help turn things around. So I think it's kind of twofold there. Is not just, and I think that's where it goes beyond just seeing yourself as an anchor, as a journalist, as a reporter to tell a story, but as truly a member of the community and an advocate for the community and for the success of this community.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, thank you, LaTrice. We're going to turn over to Ilene. And Ilene may have that last question may have a slightly different answer, but it's become part of what seems to be a Michigan State pipeline to Chattanooga media. Right?
That is true. There are now 4 of us at News Channel 9 that went to Michigan State, which makes me feel like I have a little piece of home at work, which is great. But I want to jump off what LaTrice said. First of all, I'm so grateful to be here, and thank you to Rabbi Lewis and Deborah for having me. I'm such a big advocate of these types of conversations. Whether I think bringing different groups of people together to talk about these important issues is so vital, especially nowadays. And when it comes to the media and your community, I think the media plays this really beautiful role in facilitating conversations. And, I always think that my goal as a producer, I get an hour-long rundown every night, and I hope people stay and, watch the full hour to learn about what's going on in not just our community, but around the country. And it's my job to pick those most important stories to let people know what's going on in the world and what's going on in our community. And I always hope that somebody learns something from my newscast, whether it's not just an event, but it puts a different perspective to something. I really love the phrase creating a more educated electorate, making people more educated and more informed about what they need to know going to the polls. Maybe it's a local election, or maybe it's a presidential election, but whatever issue is going on, I think the media plays such an important role in being another source of education for people. So that way they do know what's going on in their community. And if they have a problem, they can come to us to voice those problems. We say so constantly giving a voice to the voiceless, and that's, holds true, so all across journalism and all across the media, to make sure that people do know what's going on in their community. So I think, that's as far as our role, that to me is, the most important is to, be a voice and be a source of education and help facilitate such important conversations about community issues. So, yeah.
And just a little bit with this vision that you have for the media and facilitating conversation and almost like a curriculum. You sound almost like a teacher for a moment about you wanting, what you want people to come away and learn. But talk about how maybe you fell into the current position that you have, and how did you make that decision, and also to be here in our community?
Absolutely. Well, I come from, I am a product of 2 teachers. My mom was a high school band director for 30 years, and my dad actually now teaches journalism at Michigan State. So I think a lot of that comes from, my love of teaching comes from them, but it also comes from a love of storytelling, fiction and nonfiction, documentary work, journalism, all of the above. I think that I've just, whatever the medium is storytelling has been my passion for about as long as I can remember. So, I studied film and I studied writing, and I took a few journalism classes in college, and had originally, I graduated almost 2 years ago, and was looking for jobs December of 2019 without any idea of what was to come over the next few months. And then I found myself like everybody else, locked down in the middle of the pandemic and still jobless. So I, took a few months to figure out what I wanted to do. And I had this like pull in my stomach as I was watching, the news every night with my family, learning more about COVID and what was happening. And I realized I needed to be a part of that and I needed to be doing something. I'm definitely not a medical expert, nor will I ever be. So I didn't see myself going down that route, but I knew that I could take my skills and put it to use and be, a part of this and not feel like I was sitting around doing nothing because it was making me a little stir crazy. So, I kind of put out a call, and the next thing I knew, my news director or our former news director now at Channel 9 gave me a call. And weirdly enough, it sort of felt like a twist of fate. My best friend her sister lives here, and for years has been talking about how she wanted to move to Chattanooga, and she loves Tennessee, and I had never been here before I moved. And there was something so intriguing about everything she had told me about this wonderful community and its outdoor scene and the people and the culture, and all of that was confirmed when I moved here. And I always tell people that I was pleasantly surprised over and over again by Chattanooga, by the people in the community and how much there is to do here. And I also wanted to live someplace that I never expected I would live. I never thought I would live in the South. I grew up in Michigan, spent the first 20 years of my life there, and had ideas of going to California or New York or Chicago. I love big cities. But I think I wanted to be a part of a community that was different than what I knew. I love Grand Rapids, and I see a lot of similarities between Grand Rapids and Chattanooga. But Chattanooga's, the South is very different than what I grew up in, and I've learned so much, and I wanted to see, as LaTrice so eloquently mentioned, we need diversity and we need perspective. And by moving to Chattanooga, I felt like I gained a different perspective on the world, and I'm really grateful for that.
Thank you. So I would like to ask both of you, considering the topic, that we're a Black Jewish dialogue in Chattanooga. I'm curious how you feel about media representation of different groups, specifically a group that you affiliate with, and how your voice or your presence may affect that, or sometimes maybe you feel like you have to pull back, or perhaps what you'd like to see change. Any of those things. Would either one of you like to tackle that first?
I'll jump in, and I'll just say that I think one of the things when you asked, I think that you continue, and let me just say this. First of all, I love Ilene. I love her passion. And as an anchor, I love producers like that, with that passion and that drive, and just what she's saying about, being that voice and facilitating that conversation. So I just want to say to her, kudos. And they are lucky to have you there.
Thank you.
At Channel 9. Yes, as a veteran anchor, you appreciate that perspective. And I will just say now, going back to your question, Rabbi Lewis, asking me about this. First of all, I think that you come in, and I'm going to go back to just a little bit to what I was saying when you originally come in, and it's like, oh, there's this face, this Black face, or this woman of color. And but what does that really mean? And so again, that goes back to what I was saying again, as to when you really start to get involved and immerse yourself in the community. And one of the things I think then that over time, and you start to build these relationships, and that is so important, cultivate these relationships, and you build your own credibility here in this community as a person, but as an African-American woman as well. So when it comes to, I think that, yes, that is so important. And let me just say that when it comes to diversity in a newsroom, at this point, I won't hesitate to express to my management if I feel we are lacking in diversity of faces, in diversity of whether it's behind the scenes doing what Ilene is doing, whether it is, in various roles, because it is so important. And yes, because there may be a time when maybe I've been sitting in the newsroom and we're discussing a story and someone's not sure to say, well, is that offensive if you say this? And I'll just give you one example. Like people would say a lot of times, they really don't say anymore. We say public housing. People used to say the projects. Well, when we think the projects, we're talking about poor Black inner city people. And so it's kind of just small things sometimes as to how we phrase things, how we say things. That's one example. And I'm sure we may delve into this a little bit more, but things really came into light, obviously, during the death of George Floyd, during some of our other cases. How do we cover these things? And I will tell you this also on the flip side of that, when it starts talking about things like, there was like one day, like, when we were talking about, I forgot, it was years ago, but the Confederate flag. And well, if we can celebrate, Martin Luther King, then, and I think that again, then, what's wrong with, this celebration of the Confederate flag and so forth. And so I think that what you do is that you bring things into perspective. And I think that once you earn that respect and that credibility, there are a lot of things like offline that my coworkers and I will talk about sometimes too, as to, whether it's like the different perspectives of the Ahmaud Arbery case. How did that differ from the Kyle Rittenhouse case? There are just so many things, but again, it's not just, and let me just say this, and I want to emphasize this, it's not just having, someone who's Black in there. And I'm very, very serious about this. It's not just having someone who's Black in there who can say, this is how I feel, but it's having someone who is Black, who's African-American, who's maybe lived these experiences, maybe not this particular experience, but who's lived experiences and who has made a point to try to make sure that they are understanding of all of other people's feelings and making so that you can build this rapport so that you can have these conversations and dialogues. Because I really do see like this clash, this just kind of sometimes this ugly clash of, how we play into whether it's politics and different things, and how it almost comes down to, there are no gray lines sometimes. And I think that that's one of the things where that I like this, and I love this because we're talking about dialogue. And when I told people, and when I said that I was participating in this, I said, it's an open and frank discussion of dialogue. And that's what you've got to have is dialogue. Because I think one of the things too is if people don't come together, people don't talk, if people can't be honest and say, gosh, well, you know what, LaTrice, I didn't know that was offensive. And so, but thank you for letting me know. And that's a good point. Then I think that that's how you move forward in life in so many areas. And that's what we have got to do is we've got to continue to keep the lines of communication open. But I think that I want to say that I'm there also as I really do believe that I bring that voice, I bring that respect, I hope, and I bring that reason to the conversation when we talk about certain issues and how we cover them and how we write about them. It's so important. And how we, I guess how we show people or how we present people in our stories is also very important as well. And one of the things I can say about this is so important is treating everyone with respect and dignity. Maybe you live in a certain community, maybe you aren't as educated, but you know what? When we cover you, we still need to be able to show you the same level of respect and dignity that we show other people on air.
Yeah, and I'll jump in on that too. I think taking what you're saying one step further is it's not just about having you know, a Black woman, a Black man, a Jewish person, you know, in a newsroom, it's about listening and then taking action as well. You know, those conversations are important, but they're not as important if you don't do anything about them. And, you know, I've been very fortunate to be in a newsroom where they've embraced, you know, stories about Judaism. And I've done several interviews with Rabbi Lewis, you know, about Hanukkah or about Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, and the importance of these holidays. You know, growing up, I was very used to being the only Jew in most rooms. And I'm still kind of in that position. So you know, I feel a responsibility, not just as a Jew, but also as a journalist, to make sure that people, you know, the common misconceptions about Judaism are broken, because I think that, you know, we, especially as a producer, I have, you know, the power to shape the narrative of what goes in my newscast. And, you know, if there's an important issue and we don't talk about it, that's on me you know, that's, you know, it's my responsibility to pick those stories that I believe the community needs to know about. And to me, it's important that we talk about Jewish holidays and current issues. And so, you know, I've sort of taken that responsibility on myself. And, you know, I'm actually thankful. I have 3 other coworkers that are Jewish, and which is really cool. We all kind of come from different, you know, places. 2 of them are from Connecticut, one's actually from Tennessee. So that's been really unique. And we've had our own discussions, and we're all, you know, experiencing Judaism in a different way. Like, you know, I grew up in a Jewish family, but we also celebrate Christmas. You know, I have my Christmas tree up still behind me. And you know, it's up in the corner, but it's, you know, for me, it's about what that represents. It's about, you know, family and togetherness. And, you know, so I'm used to being that kind of only person and answering if you celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah, you must get double the presents. Like, that was the question I got growing up, rather than, you know, what is the significance of Hanukkah, rather than Hanukkah's really commercialized because happens around Christmas, rather than, like, you know, let's talk about, you know, Yom Kippur and why that's important, or Rosh Hashanah and why that's important. So I feel really grateful that I have a little bit of a megaphone to share those stories, because I truly believe there's far too much ignorance when it comes to I don't even want to say minority communities, but minority communities, you know, about those things. And I'm more than happy to be frank with people when they ask about, you know, Judaism. And I think I think that's just such an important role to have, and voice to share.
That's so important, Ilene, that you say that. I just have to say this, that I remember sharing this with, and I'm sure you all know, my former coworker, who was, as we call him here in Chattanooga, my television husband, Jed. And so one of the things I remember telling Jed this, I was like, you know, Jed, I was like, and I was really young at the time, and we grew up in Nashville, and I said, my brother's best friend, and I didn't know it for the longest, was Jewish. And so, you know, because I was about 6 or 7 at the time, and as a child, you just, you know, that was just my brother's best friend who lived next door to us. And I remember, though, then again, my brother would talk about, you know, I would hear him, because he was older, you know, and talk about the holidays, like you were saying, whether it's Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Hanukkah, and different things. And then as I got older, I began to understand them, you know, a lot more. And obviously learned a lot, as you know, with Jed. And we're like, okay, how is this going to go over here in the Tennessee Valley? You have this Jewish guy and this Black woman on the air. And we're like, let's see if we can do it and continue to be number 1, you know? So, but yeah, I think it really is. And again, that goes back to the fact that I love that, what you were saying about educating people, because obviously over the years, I've read up a lot more to understand a deeper understanding of the Jewish holidays. And I think that that's so important, because like you said, there are all of these stereotypes and misconceptions when it comes to minority communities. And I think it is so important, like you said, shame on us if we sit back and we don't stop them in their tracks, or correct that narrative, or do something to speak up and speak out and change the conversation, be it through our newscast, be it through what we put out, the stories that we cover. So I think that that is, so I really like what I tell people, it's not just a job, but it is also an obligation and a responsibility that we have.
I can just vouch that it's always a good thing if you can drop Jed Mescon's name. So
I know, I love Jed, I still do. So yes.
You both mentioned some things that are really fascinating. One was helping to shape the narrative. I think, LaTrice, your example of even shaping the language that we use when you talk about public housing is really a powerful thing that really has to be intentional. And you also talked about just not just representation, but helping people to walk in somebody else's shoes and to understand their story and to really feel like they can empathize with it. And just real quick anecdote for myself about representation. I really appreciate Ilene's presence here because I think my first year here, a local media company ran, I won't say who, but you might guess because it was print, ran a story about Passover, and it was an AP, they picked it up from the AP, and it was a story out of Knoxville. And I thought, if only they knew that there were Jewish people down the street that they could have asked about it. But at any rate, before I open it up to more questions, I'm wondering if there's a particular story, and you can answer one or both of these things briefly, but that you are particularly proud of, or perhaps a story that you've covered that has been particularly challenging or difficult in your time here.
Ilene, you want to start?
Might have to think about that for a minute. I mean, this doesn't necessarily, I'll share this first and maybe I'll think of something else, but the Michigan school shootings in the last couple of weeks has been, this isn't necessarily about Judaism, but I think it's still an important topic to talk about. The shootings that happened a couple weeks ago, it hit particularly close to home. I had friends that I went to college with who teach at Oxford. My mom, who's, like I said, was a teacher in Michigan for 30 years, knew people who went there and who live around there. So that was a particularly hard week to cover all of that because it hit particularly close to home. I guess that's just the most recent example, but I had a conversation with my mom about that, and she said, part of the reason I needed to retire, not just after her, very long and successful career, but she was feeling, rather exhausted by school shootings. And, she's like, I'm tired of having to take a piano and bar it up against a door. And, that's such a vivid image in my mind. And, to think that there are people who are in those positions every day and are doing code red drills and school shooter drills, is really hard. And we cover shootings across Chattanooga all the time, whether it's an isolated incident, but those are always tough, and crime and violence in a community is always hard to cover, but this one in particular was just very difficult for me. So I'll start with that.
I think for me, just one of the things, and at the time a lot of our team from behind the scenes as well really just had to breathe. After the George Floyd case, it was really tough in so many ways, because as I told my colleagues and so many others there, for me, it wasn't just what I saw, and that was so disturbing and just gut-wrenching and punched you in the heart. But you just think about, I said, guys, just think about this. I said, as a mother of a Black son, I said, every day, I said, every so often, you have to have the talk with your son. I said, and that is something that some people will never understand, what is having to have that, the talk with your son. Like, listen, I know you're not doing anything, you're not getting in trouble, but you know what? It just takes one mistake, your lights out, anything, and just going over the whole thing, that if you're stopped, this is what you do. If you're speeding and you're stopped, these are the steps that you take, and just reiterating that over and over. And then, if your son is out with your friends and they're just like, Mom, I'm just right around the corner, please text me, send me a text message, call me, make sure that I know that you're okay. And I think that just I think when you see that, and let me just say that about this, is that what I hate about something like that, and I also think we have an obligation to do, is that not just to point out the perspectives, the feelings, the emotions of how you just can't even imagine what something like that is like, unless you've been there, you've seen that from, being a perspective of being an African American. But also, I think this whole ugly notion that some people use to politicize whether, you hate one side or you hate the other side. And the important thing that I said, that it is important for us to continue to point out that you are talking about one bad person or two bad people who did a very, very bad thing here. And we are not, and so we're not going to group everyone together. And so that's so important, I think. And at the same time, so as we continue to make sure that we respect, uplift, and celebrate, our law enforcement who do so much in our communities each and every day, that we are pointing out an ill of society that is the bad apples or a bad apple. And I think that, but when you do have such a bad apple as that one, you have to call a spade in that case. So I think that that's so important. But I think that just this whole thing that I think we took time, and I think it was great at the time. Our then news director, Callie Starnes, gave us the opportunity. We put this piece on our website, and she asked all of us there in the newsroom, African Americans, to just kind of really, put this in perspective and write what this meant to them, how this made us feel. And I think that was really good, because as we know, for anything, journaling and writing is a form of therapy in a lot of ways. So I think that was really good, that I saw that we were open and we really had that open conversation, and we still do, about diversity, and when things happen in the community or nationwide, how do we handle it in the newsroom? So I think that's so important.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned how, I guess, still being able to uphold and celebrate our police force.
Absolutely.
In the midst of all of this. And I serve as a chaplain for the police department here. And I know just from my interactions that there is a morale issue and a sense of shame over what happened with the George Floyd case. That just, if there is a way for the media to also then to continue to portray and celebrate the good that most police officers are, that is a boost for them.
It is so important. The men and women who put on that uniform every day and go out here and serve and protect our community are heroes, and they are awesome. And there's no other way to say that. And we want to continue to do that. And we do continue to do that. And it is so important, and that we not let people from whatever perspective or whatever the hidden agenda is, to take it and use that as a wedge issue to divide people, to say whether you either like one or you like the other. If you're supporting one here, then that means you're not supporting the other here, or vice versa. And that's what and again, that goes back to this conversation and dialogue, that we can't allow that to happen. And that's why it's so important for open communication.
Well, and I just want to add, I think it's important that, when we look at these, errors of one person, it's the error of that individual and not of that group. And I think really
Yes.
getting people to change that stigma is so important. If I were to, make a fatal error of some kind, it's me, Ilene Gould, making that error, not me, Ilene, the white female Jew. Like, you know, that has to become separate, because you can't take, you know, the actions of Derek Chauvin and compare it to another, you know, white Chattanooga police officer. You just can't. They're different people, and it's a different circumstance. And I think getting, you know, again, as journalists and as media professionals, we have to be the people that make those distinctions, and not let race or religion or gender become the first piece of knowledge that is put forward.
Okay. So I wanted to open up for questions. I see there's a hand already raised. I also, if somebody doesn't feel comfortable speaking on camera, feel free to type a question into the chat. You can either send it directly to me or just send it to that everyone can read it. And I will go through those as much as we have time for. So Deborah Ashton, Dr. Deborah Ashton, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. My question is, and let me say at one point in time, I actually did police and fire selection. So I do admire the people who go into the public safety arena. At the same time, I think there's two things I was going to ask about. One is separating out the fact that sometimes there are structural issues around that affects one group more than the other. And it may be because of poverty more so than race, but race and poverty are so much entwined in our country. For instance, you know, the difference for how they sentence folks based on whether folks were taking crack cocaine versus whether they were taking pother, understanding those differences. The other piece that I wanted to ask specifically is, as we discuss, especially to talk with the young Black males and the coverage in the news media, it seems to me that at times that the plight of Black women, young Black women, and their interactions with police do not get the same coverage when it occurs. And you probably know some of the incidents without me naming them. And what are your views on that? And how do we make sure that all your marginalized groups, whether it's because of anti-Semitism or racism, et cetera, are addressed in such a way that it's fair to those groups and truly represent what's going on in an objective fashion?
Okay, Ilene, you want to start, or you want me to? I can start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I think first of all, thank you very much for your question and for participating with us today. When you start talking about that, and yes, the incidents of young Black females as compared to those with young Black males, and that they grab the headlines more so, I think that is important. And let me say this, in some cases, we don't know as much about in the cases of the Black females. And I always tell people it is so important, because they'll say, LaTrice, why didn't you all cover such and such? And I'll say, did you call us? Did you tell anybody? Did you let us know? Now, that may not be the case in the cases or the particular incidents that you're talking about here. But again, I think it is sounding that alarm, making sure that we are aware that we have the information, and not, stopping when it comes to sounding that alarm, not stopping when it comes to saying, hey, I want to make sure that you know about this. Hey, did you hear about this? I have this information about this that I want to make sure that's shared with your newsroom. So again, I want to say that then once we have that information, we do have a responsibility to check, to verify, to look into this, and to make some phone calls and to see what we come up with and to see what is there. Now, sometimes maybe we make some phone calls and we can't get anywhere with it. We can't get the information. And sometimes maybe the people involved, maybe they don't want to talk or cooperate. And I'll tell you, a lot of times that will also stop some coverage and some things in their tracks. So that's important as well. But it is absolutely important that we provide the same amount of coverage, and we provide the same level and respect of coverage to young females who are impacted as we do when it comes to young males.
LaTrice, I'm so glad you mentioned something in there that really wasn't the heart of the question, but I think still important, the verification and confirmation of the story and the media ethics that I think a lot of the public doesn't recognize is a real division between what are credible media sources versus the, I won't say incredible, the uncredible, less than credible media sources that can run with any story and twist it whichever they want. And so certainly appreciate that level of follow through and commitment to verification.
And that leads into actually what I wanted to add on is that, I think knowing about these stories takes a great amount of open communication between the community and their media outlets, and knowing how to, bring those stories to us is we do our best to, gather everything through the community, but there are still things that we rely on viewers to tell us about. So having that level of open communication and trust, knowing that we are going to verify sources and be a trustworthy organization, and, trust in the media is so low nowadays, and it's so important that we, take that time to make sure that people do know that they can come to us, they can trust us, and that we're not trying to lie about anything. So I think, not just having an open dialogue, but having an understanding of the journalistic process is important. So that way, people who accuse the media of lying or spewing fake news, that they understand and people understand, what our jobs entail. We are going to make calls. We're going to make sure that this is a real, story. And I think, that, like I said, that level of trust and open communication between a community and a media outlet is super important for all kinds of stories.
We have a question from Deborah Dubo.
Hi there, and it's really good to see you again, Ilene. It's been a while.
See you too.
So one of the questions that I had, which really is, I guess, a tag on to what's been discussed thus far, is this idea about, I agree that, certainly journalism, it's your role to make sure you're trustworthy and you're backing up your sources and that we can trust you, because certainly right now we have so much fake news, if you will, or a lot of alternate realities, as we say, and different kinds of news sources that aren't really news. And so my question is, aside from doing the trust and doing the validity of the articles, is there anything else that you're doing or can do to counteract what I would call these false narratives and these inaccurate stories? And I mean, I'm just thinking about our anniversary this week on January 6th, of what went on and the different narratives and the different stories about people's perceptions about what actually happened there. So I'd love to hear your perspectives about what you're doing to address these things that are very difficult right now.
I think one of the things for us is that, I will tell you this, one of our reporters came to me and a lot of times was like, LaTrice, I'm trying to get in contact with, our local, not local, but our lawmakers that represent this area, be it congressional representatives, be it our senators that represent us, about the anniversary of January the 6th. And they got absolutely no response from anyone. Some said no comment, some just did not return the calls at all. And I think this is the same thing that I think that one of the things that you do as a journalist is you continue to uphold your values and ethics and fairness when it comes to these stories. And I think that at the same time, you are open and you are honest with your viewers that say, you know what, we reached out to congressional representative blank blank, and they did not respond, or they said they had no comment about this. You will have, and you do have to be so careful, because we do have a lot of times, you will have people, and I know Ilene is familiar with this too. Some of our national representatives, they'll say, hey, so-and-so is available for an interview, and she or he wants to talk about these issues. And if you have any other questions, you have to send them in writing. And I remember saying one day, no, why would we do that? No journalist ever submits any questions in writing, because therefore you go into it knowing that there are no restraints or constraints on you, and that it is an open, this is not a pre-planned, rehearsed conversation or interview. And you've had some politicians who, when you do that, will cancel the interviews if you don't want to go with a particular narrative, or if you, for instance, will not submit questions that you are going to ask them. And I think that is so important too, because especially young journalists have to be very careful about that.
Yeah.
Because they will be the ones a lot of times, because let's just be frank and honest. People know a lot of times some people who they want to be interviewed by, because they'll say, is it going to be a softball interview, so to speak? And so you have to remember, and, just kind of as a newsroom policy, that, we don't do this. This is not how we handle these stories. We are journalists, we are professionals, and we are going to be fair. We're going to let, whomever say whatever it is, but we are going to ask them questions, and we're going to put their answers on what they say. But we're also going to put it on if they don't answer questions that we ask. So I think that when you are, again, consistent, then that also leads to credibility. And that's on both sides. It doesn't matter who it is. That's on all sides. But you have to do that. And I think that that is so important, because I think that a lot of times people will say local journalists don't know how to ask sometimes the tough questions to certain people, and they let them control the narrative of the story. And especially if it's a new reporter or a young journalist, sometimes they do that. And so that's so important that you don't let that happen, because again, you want to maintain your newsroom credibility and your station credibility. And so that you are, again, you're consistent, you're tough, but you're fair.
Yeah.
And you're fair to everyone, no matter what the issue is and no matter who it is. So I think that that's so important, and something that you definitely have to keep in mind, because because this narrative, it is fighting against this narrative now. And I think you all probably saw the story of where one of our reporters actually got arrested for asking a question at a congressional representative's town hall meeting, and it made national news. And, that was a very teachable moment, because it's like, would you have done anything different? Like not ask a question? You're at a town hall. It's, and so this is a representative of the people. So, there's so many lessons that we have learned. And yes, it is now just kind of this constant battle, as you say, when you fight this narrative of fake news. But again, it's about continuing to be consistent, continuing to be fair, and therefore continuing to build up your credibility as a journalist and as a news organization.
Well, and interviewing lawmakers is one of my favorite things to do, because I think I love elections and political science. Like that to me is super fascinating. But I also think it's an opportunity to debate with a lawmaker. And the biggest, one of the biggest issues I have with our electoral process is a lot of how debates are handled, especially televised debates. Because I think when you ask a question as a journalist or as a moderator, that follow-up question is more important than the initial question. And it's if they say something, we as the interviewer, as the journalist, needs to say, wait a second, that's not correct. Or we need to be the person to correct them and back up our information with facts or with statistics that either prove them wrong. So I think a lot of what it takes to gain that trust back is to show that we are credible people when we ask a question. And if, we have debates in our newsroom all the time about, Marjorie Taylor Greene said this today, or former President Trump said this, is this something we can put on the air? Yes, because we should correct them or say like, nope, this is actually what's happening. Or do we give airtime to their lies and to the things that they're saying? I think that is such an important conversation for us to have too, because we don't want to just put them out for the sake of putting out there of what they have to say, especially if it's not true or if it's libelous or slander. So I think, being people to, not just, I've been in interviews with people before and with lawmakers before, and they'll go on for 5 or 10 minutes on some, it sounds very scripted stump speech. And I said, all right, now it's time for me to ask the questions. Like, you've gotten what you have to say, like, let's have a conversation here now. And I think that, being able to, show both sides and okay, here's this soundbite, here's what actually is going on. And be that person to kind of show, to show both sides. And I think that is super important as far as building credibility. And, you mentioned, Deborah, using, January 6th. The visuals of that day are so powerful that I think just using that as not just as sound or as words, but, to avoid being a cliche, the picture is going to tell the story. And, you can't argue with an image. And the images of people storming the Capitol, like, those are things that nobody's going to forget anytime soon. And, that day in our newsroom was probably one of the most vivid I've had over the last almost 2 years of working here. Definitely by far the most stressful day I've ever had at work. At 4:45, our news director came in and said, throw out the rundown, which is something that sounds like it only happens in TV or movies, but it actually happened.
It happens.
And I was a lowly producer who had been there 6 months. And, but I learned so much that day about, not just breaking news, but about, the importance of how to handle those kinds of things. But yeah, I'll remember that day forever.
I think that is so important. Like you were saying, I think that sometimes you let the pictures in the video speak for itself. And I think when we have this, these narrative that, these were tourists, law-abiding, citizens, just visiting the Capitol, just wanting to stand up for their beliefs. I think that you really do, then as a journalist, you do have the responsibility, like you said, Ilene. And again, I love your perspective on this and how you think about the big picture in that. And let me just say, this is like, want to just pay you a compliment. What I always tell young producers, especially young producers, I love it when we think big picture. And let's just get outside of our box here and just look, as we look straight ahead the story here, but let's think big picture here. And I think that that's so important, the way that you're correct, the way that you broke that down as to how do we handle that? How do we deal with that? But again, I think those images of what happened on January 6th is, no matter how that spun as to, that was just a peaceful protest, that was just tourists. I think that, again, as journalists, as we continue to do our job, that was a lot more than that, obviously. And it was something very serious in this country's history. Very scary, very frightening to think about that something like that could happen, and what the end goal was here for that day.
Thank you. I know there was a hand up a moment ago. Christine, do you want to take the last question, or did they already cover it?
No, it's hard to get light after all of this stuff that's heavy and that we all need to hear. I was just going to tell Ilene that, hey, I'm a Michigander myself. The only thing is I went to Michigan, but but I'm old. I'm 78, so I'm old, and people went to Michigan in those days more than state.
Well, it's okay. I have 2 aunts and lots of my best friends went to U of M, so it's okay. It's okay. The rivalries can be put aside for some things.
Yeah.
There is one last question here, and I think it's a good question, and we probably don't have time to go super in depth on it, but and I think it's from Richard, who will change his last name to Nielsen for the moment, because he's asking about how ratings play into some decisions about what to cover. His last name's not actually Nielsen, but
well, obviously, let's not kid ourselves. Ratings are important. You know, my goal is, as much as I love Ilene and everyone over there, I want to win. I want to be number one every day. I'm sure she does. I know she does. I can tell by her. I love, like I told you, I just love her spunk, and you know, but yes. I think that obviously we cover what matters to our community. We cover what matters. I mean, and let me just say, there are some stories that, as we say, they aren't sexy or they aren't pretty, meaning that, you know, they aren't melodramatic, and maybe you don't have a lot of great visuals with these stories, but boy, oh boy, they're important. Like when you need to know who the next superintendent of Hamilton County is, when you need to know something about potholes or taxes in your community, or whether it's being raised, those stories matter to our viewers, and those stories matter to our community. And as journalists, we better cover them. Some of the other stories, it goes without saying. Yes, some of the national trending stories, when they're big national trending stories, you're going to see them. You're going to see them quite a bit. And why do you see them? You see them because people are talking about them. People are talking about them, not just you know, on the national websites. People are talking about them on our websites. People want to know more about these stories. So yes, you are going to see those as well. It used to be this saying, and that it's no longer, if it bleeds, it leads. And so, but that's not the case anymore. And you know, that's a good thing, because a lot of times, you notice we've kind of, and I know we can't go in depth, we've kind of changed our policy on, you know, how we cover a lot of things, as far as even, you know, this is just in different criminal things, like showing mugshots, not in like a murder. But so I think that it really is, again, it's knowing your audience. And that comes again to establishing relationships where people, leaders in this community, you will hear from them, and you'll say, hey, I got a call from so-and-so, and did we know about this? Are we covering this? So that is so important. Again, it is knowing your audience, knowing your community, connecting with your community. That's so important. But yes, and you better know what matters to your community. And again, yes, as I said, if you have those huge national trending stories, you will see them there too, because it's what people are talking about. It's what they want to know about.
Yeah. And I can't speak directly towards ratings still being fairly green in this industry, but I can speak to, you know, my mantra is a good story is a good story. And I like to think that the content will drive the audience. So I would rather look at the quality of the story rather than the numbers. You know, I'm definitely not a mathematician, and I never have been, but I think, you know, looking at, you know, like LaTrice said, what your audience wants. You know, I produce First at 10 on Fox, so which is now an hour-long show. So we're going into our third month of that. And, you know, I was looking at data recently of, you know, how audience trends in the show, trying to figure out, you know, where are people watching and how long are they watching for? And those kinds of things are going to impact my decision, you know. I don't want to necessarily, because there's, I think, a fine line too, especially as a producer, between clickbait stories that you know, or sensationalized stories, because I don't want to just put, you know, like LaTrice said, we don't, you know, sometimes I don't want to listen to a 4-hour school board meeting, or, you know, but those issues are so important, and they're not flashy, but, or they're not visually interesting, but they're important to the community. And, you know, so putting those things, you know, in your, you know, knowing what's important to the community, but also knowing what's going to capture people's attention. You know, can I deep tease a story into 10:30, or something that's going to be super visually interesting that I can tease well, or with a great soundbite. The other day, this is a great example. I teased this story about a man who quit his job and has been living out of like a big bus because he wants to just be remote. He wants to drive around wherever he goes. And the soundbite was, "I poop in a bucket." And right. It was, everyone was cracking up. And, but like something like that, you hear that in a tease and you're like, oh, I want to watch that and like learn what that's all about. So, it's my job as a producer to kind of have that news judgment and the good storytelling judgment to help bringing the audience in. We're competitors, but at the end of the day, our goal is the same, as to educate the community, be a voice for good journalism and for Chattanooga. And I don't take that responsibility lightly. I don't think any journalist does, because we are grappling with credibility and with trust issues. And we talked about Derek Chauvin and holding one police officer accountable for everything. The same goes for journalism. You have one bad egg and everyone else kind of could fall behind that. You look at local news is very different than mainstream media or cable news, or CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. Those things are going to be very different coverage than what you're going to get in local news. And I hope people still recognize the difference between that, because that is super important too. So.
And I just want to say, piggyback something off Ilene say, we joke about it, and sometimes, but say, yes, we are competitors. But I remember telling people that, a lot of times we're also friends. And one of the things that, I mean this in all sincerity, would I go out and socialize with people from other stations? Absolutely. And I think that, that's one of the things, like, do I, socialize back and forth with on social media with some of my friends from Channel 9? Of course I do. And, of course, I've known David Glenn for a while as well over there. So, and it's, I think that that's one of the things too, that's a little bit different with local news, is that sometimes we are like a family. And like I said, I just feel like, not even having met Ilene, this is my very first time, but I feel like I know her and I've already made a connection with her. And I think that that's so important, because again, at the end of the day, like you said, it really is just about connecting with your audience and also doing the best job possible for this community. And I think that's what, honestly, in all sincerity, what we all go out there each and every day to do. And so, and I truly respect all of my counterparts and at Channel 9 and Channel 12 who do this every day, who get up every day and just want to put the best product on air as possible.
Well, and I'll echo what you said. When I heard that LaTrice was going to be on this panel, I was so excited, because I watched Channel 3 to learn what you guys do and what I'm still learning as a producer, and it's fun. It's nice to finally put a face to a name and to have this connection. So this was so thank you to Rabbi and to Deborah for putting us together. This has been great.
Yes, thank you so much, Deborah and Rabbi, for absolutely. Because I looked and I read up on the information. I was like, oh, I would like to meet her. So yes, I really did. Like I said, I have just enjoyed it, and I truly have. And like I said, from the very first thing you said, I think, Ilene, I said, hey, I like that. So yes.
You guys have found your kindred spirits. And so I definitely want to thank you both. I think I have to put on my rabbi hat for a moment and just say, I was really remark how some of what you talked about really reflects a core Jewish value. One of the early famous rabbis, Rabbi Hillel, was famous for saying, in a place where people are not being human, all the more so strive to be human yourself. And I think in the media, you have that unique challenge to not just follow the flow of where the stories are going, but to maintain your ground and uphold to your values and to tell the stories that you feel need to be told. And we are very fortunate, I feel, in our community that we have both of you. And I know that this forum today, we all feel more enriched and enlightened for having had you here. So thank you for your time. Thank you for the hard work that you do. And thank you for your friendship. I've known Ilene for a couple of years. LaTrice, I consider you a new friend as well. And
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
thank
Honored.
you everyone for attending today. And Deborah, do you want to make an announcement about February?
Sure. First of all, thank you all for coming. And LaTrice, Ilene, you're wonderful. I hope that we can follow this up. You'll be hearing from us. And in February, we will do a dialogue again. And this time it will be about history, February being Black History Month. We have a special guest, and I myself will be the guest on the Jewish end of things, talking about history, Holocaust, and whatnot. So I hope you'll join us. And again, thank you, Rabbi, and all of you for having this dialogue, which is so important to make this time, this environment, a better one for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. See you next month, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.